Howdy, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Me and Miss Pettyjohn have been enjoying our time with our beautiful little daughter. She's doing well, and we're having a great time, other than not getting a lot of sleep at night. But we're absolutely loving it. I hope you guys are doing well. All right, we finished North America, and now we're going to move on, and we're going to get into Africa. This is just kind of an introduction to Africa. This is not going to really give you too many specifics. I'll come back with some more specifics, but this is just kind of a brief overview. This is going to include some brief history as well as some brief geographic overview of the continent of Africa. Now, one thing I want to keep in mind, that while we progress through this unit on Africa, the people within Africa view Africa, their continent, as pretty much how we would view the United States. These countries, whether you're in Burundi or Nigeria or Algeria or Zimbabwe, they all view one another how we view the States. You know, we're familiar with New York. We have a lot of similarities. We have a lot in common. That is how the people within Africa view themselves in Africa. They don't really view themselves as other countries. Now, obviously, they are separate countries within Africa, and they do have to use passports to get between them and stuff like that. But when it comes to actually talking to people in Africa, they describe each other, the countries, kind of how we would describe states. So keep that in mind as we progress through this unit. All right. Let's get some geographic features out of the way. The world's largest desert is the Sahara Desert. And when I say this, I'm excluding Antarctica, because Antarctica is technically the world's largest desert, but it's not a sand desert. And when we think of deserts, we typically think of sand deserts, right? This desert is massive. If we come over here, we can see it from space. This is a monster. This all right there. This is all the Sahara Desert. And if we compare it to the United States, so this is a true size comparison, right? You look at a map, and the United States looks bigger than this area, but keep in mind that when we have a map, it's taking a globe and putting it onto a flat surface, so it's not entirely accurate. So if we take the United States and we put it over the Sahara, you'll notice that the Sahara is technically larger than the United States. So it is massive. From Egypt to the Western Sahara, it's over 3,000 miles long. Absolutely massive. Okay? If you were to drop into the Sahara, this is what you might see. You actually look here, you can see little footprints right there of an animal. This is going to be common in the Sahara. There's all sorts of little rabbits and snakes and tarantula spiders that live in this area. But you're not going to have any deer or any bears or anything like that. It's mainly animals that, for the most part, they are nocturnal, meaning they come out at night. All right, we have the world's largest waterfall. Now, when I say largest, I don't mean tallest. The world's tallest waterfall is actually located in Venezuela, which is in South America. And it is half a mile tall. Okay, when you go out to the track, run around the track 2 times, where the football field is, you run around the track 2 times, that's half a mile high. That is how high the world's tallest waterfall is. But the world's largest is actually located in Africa. It is located near the country of Zimbabwe in southern Africa, and it is called Victoria Falls. It is only 355 feet tall, so it's not super tall, but it is very, very long. And in fact, there's so much rain and water and mist that's coming off this waterfall that the nearby rainforest receives 24 hours of rain a day, because there's just so much mist coming off of it. So here's what it looks like. Absolutely beautiful, right? It keeps going way out there, and it keeps going, and it keeps going, and it keeps going. Now, you'll notice it's not like one giant waterfall. There's like cracks. We have some water here, water there, water there. Yeah, but it's a beautiful, beautiful waterfall. All right. We have the Africa's tallest mountain is Mount Kilimanjaro. Now, when you look at this picture, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is Lion King, but The second thing that comes to mind is maybe the fact that there are no mountains nearby it. It's kind of standing by itself, and it's also kind of flat, right? So when we look at this from space, let's go down here and we'll see it from space. It's down here in northern Tanzania and southern Kenya. It kind of looks like a pimple as you zoom in, okay? Right, kind of looks like a pimple almost. It's all by itself. There's no other mountains around it. You have this little peak over here, but it's not a real mountain. The reason for this is it is not a part of a mountain chain. It is a volcano. So the tallest mountain in Africa is actually a volcano. Now, it is about 20,000 feet tall, so it is very tall. But what's cool is down here in Tanzania, this is kind of like the Serengeti. This is where you would see elephants and giraffes, and it's really cool to see those animals, and then behind it you see this beautiful mountain. And you can look up lots of pictures of Mount Kilimanjaro, and there's giraffes and zebras and all sorts of animals in front of this beautiful mountain. If you stand on the top of the mountain, this is what it would look like. Nothing too exciting, but that's the top of the mountain. All right, next we have what's called the Sahel. It's this semi-arid region in the southern Sahara, essentially. The Sahel, as we zoom in here, is this light green area that you see right here. The dark green around the Congo and the DRC and Gabon down there, that's going to be rainforest. This region above it, it's not rainforest, it's the Sahel. It's not a desert. There are lots of trees, but it's not a rainforest either. It's kind of like a healthy mix, okay? All right. Next, you have the Nile River. The Nile River is the world's longest river. Now, the Nile River is over 4,258 miles long, okay? And it actually starts, I'll show you guys where it starts. It starts in a couple different places. It starts down in Burundi as well as Uganda. It starts at some of these lakes, and it flows north. Think about that for a second. It flows north. It goes essentially, up would not be a accurate way, but it flows north. It's one of two rivers in the world that actually flows north, and it's very interesting that it does that, and that's the Nile right there, actually. It starts, I'll show you where one of the places it starts is actually here in northern Uganda. This is called, you zoom in, you can see that this is called the White Nile, and it is pretty ferocious, a pretty ferocious river. It's definitely a river you don't want to, I mean, you could go water rafting on it, but I wouldn't feel safe. But you can see it kind of comes back through here. It starts at this lake. This lake actually comes from several different other lakes, like Lake Victoria flows into Lake Alberta, and there's another river in Burundi that flows up here. So this is a huge river, and we'll go way up north. There's the Nile right there. It makes this huge curve, right? Really weird how it does that. And then it flows way up here. Crazy. Huge river. World's longest river. Now, when I say longest, it is technically not the largest. The world's largest river, meaning the most water in a river, would actually be the Amazon River. The Amazon River is close to being as long as the Nile River, but it has like 2 to 4 times the amount of water in it than the Nile River does. The Nile River is going to be a beautiful river. You're going to have hippopotamuses here. You're going to have crocodile here. You're going to have lots of trash too because it flows through 11 different countries. It is longer than going from New York to California by 1,000 miles. New York to California is 3,000 miles, and it is 1,000 miles longer than that. So there's lots of pollution in this river. But it looks like a big river similar to the Missouri River. It's just really long. So there you go. All right, we're going to get into some quick history. I'm going to try to fly through this. Egypt's history can be broken into 3 periods. Each period is about 1,000 years long. These are called kingdoms. We had the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom. The Old Kingdom is when the pyramids were built, roughly in the year 2,500 BC. So about 4,500 years ago. Those pyramids are very, very, very old. Okay. The Middle Kingdom, nothing too exciting. The New Kingdom had one queen to end it, and we're all probably familiar with her. Her name is Cleopatra, but we'll talk about her later. So here's what the pyramids look like. You zoom in on this guy. You see those stones. They are huge. Okay, these things, they are massive, the pyramids. You can climb on them, but you're not supposed to go above a certain length. It is illegal to climb to the top. You can find pictures of people doing it, and you can find YouTube videos of people doing it, but it is illegal. And one of the reasons for this is very old, and obviously if people keep running up it up and down, it's not going to last forever. And Egypt wants these to last for a very, very long time, even though they have pretty much. But there you see just how big these blocks are. They believe that today, if we were to recreate the pyramids, it would take roughly 5 years and over $5 billion. How did they make the pyramids? This is up for debate. There's an idea that we get from the Greek historian named Herodotus. He is known as the father of history because he's the first guy to ever actually record history, like for real. Now, Herodotus lived about the year 500 BC. It's in the 400 BCs, but around 500 BC. And Herodotus went to Egypt, and he asked the Egyptians how they built the pyramids. And they told him that they used essentially like wooden cranes and pulleys and levers. Okay? Nothing crazy, nothing super fancy. But keep in mind, Herodotus, when he did this, it was 2,000 years after the pyramids had been built. That would be like if you went back and you asked Emperor Flavian during the Roman Empire around 80. Actually, let me rephrase this. It would be like if you asked your friend who lived in Egypt. Hold on, that's not a good example either. It would be like if you went and asked someone in Italy today how they built the Colosseum. Okay? That's how much of a difference there is. So we're not exactly sure how the Egyptians built the pyramids. The best information comes 2,000 years after they were already built. So there's lots of different theories, but anyway. Egypt has pharaohs. A pharaoh is essentially a king or a queen. It's believed that there were about 170 pharaohs total. There's a few that are debated. The last one is Cleopatra. The whole story of Romeo and Juliet that comes from Shakespeare is based on Cleopatra and her lover Mark Antony. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Cleopatra was dating Julius Caesar. You may have heard of Julius Caesar, okay? Little Caesars, right? Julius Caesar was assassinated, and Cleopatra was in Rome when he was assassinated, and she fled back to Egypt. But when she fled back to Egypt, she left with Julius Caesar's friend, Mark Antony, who then she started to date. So, anyway, the whole Romeo and Juliet concept, it's roughly based on her and Mark Antony and their demise. They both ended up dying. But she was very brilliant. She spoke over 7 languages, I think 8. I'm not positive on that, but she spoke at least 7 languages. Very smart woman, and she was the last pharaoh of Egypt. After that, Rome kind of took over, and Rome ruled Egypt. All right, so within Egypt, they have what's called a dynasty. A dynasty is a family or a group that rule for several generations. There's lots of crazy dynasty stories. We have like sons whose mothers murdered them and just crazy things that happen. It's very interesting. And unfortunately, there was a lot of inbreeding, like brother and sister would get married because they wanted to keep their dynasty pure. So there's a lot of messed up stuff like this, and it's kind of sad, but that's just what happened, okay? Although the Egyptians are not the first to use a writing system, that would be Mesopotamia with cuneiform. You should have learned about that last year. It looks like a bunch of arrows. Egypt is the first to use paper, a version of paper called papyrus. It's these reeds they would take together, they'd weave together, and then they'd stamp them, and you'd get all the juice essentially out, and then you could write on them. Egypt used hieroglyphics. Now, it's crazy how we were able to decode hieroglyphics, but we've only been able to understand Egyptian for about 200 years. About 200 years. It was Napoleon Bonaparte, the French were in Egypt, and they found this stone called the Rosetta Stone, and they essentially tried to decipher it. And how they deciphered it is because there's 3 different languages on this Rosetta Stone. There is Greek at the top, and there is hieroglyphics on the bottom. And they knew that the Greek, or maybe it's the backwards, I can't remember, but they knew the Greek and they were able to take the Greek and compare it to the hieroglyphics, and they were able to then figure out what each letter, what each symbol represented. And I actually have hieroglyphics around here somewhere. I don't know where, but anyway, so we've only been able to decode and understand hieroglyphics for less than 200 years. So if you want a career that's very interesting and you would learn lots of crazy information that no one's ever found out before, you could be an Egyptologist, go to Egypt, and help translate hieroglyphics. South Africa is located at the very, very bottom of Africa, and they unfortunately have a dark history that we're going to talk about just real briefly. We'll talk about it a little later on in class, but they used to have what's called the apartheid. The apartheid was this evil regime, essentially, that said that white people and black people needed to be separated. Now, sounds similar to the United States, except it in its own way was worse, and it lasted longer than what happened here in the United States with segregation. So the apartheid was the official racial segregation that was practiced in South Africa. White people and black people were separated. They couldn't live together. Families were literally split apart. And there were people who fought against it. One of the most famous people to fight against it is Nelson Mandela. This is Nelson Mandela right here. He fought against the apartheid movement and was protesting, peaceful protest. And the apartheid regime, the government at the time in South Africa, locked him up in prison for protesting their government. And they locked him up for life. Okay? Now, he served 27 years in prison. 27 years, guys. That was a fourth of his life. He served 1/4 of his life. He lived 1/4 of his life in prison. And eventually the apartheid regime fell apart. The new regime that came in released him from prison. He then ran for president of South Africa and became South Africa's first black president after this evil regime had... it's just crazy what happened. Now, Mandela was this stud who wanted to reunite the country in a peaceful way and bring people back together. And he's an example for all of us, and we will learn more about him when I return. I hope you guys learned something today. Please, please, please keep working hard. Hope you guys are doing well. Bye-bye.